Title: The Rake's Grasp. In the quiet town of Eldridge Hollow, stories of the Rake were whispered through the generations, each recounting the same chilling details. A gaunt figure, emaciated and faceless, that lurked in the shadows, its long fingers reaching out like spider legs craving warmth. But most brushed it aside as folklore, a bedtime tale to scare children into behaving. Ellie Thompson wasn't one to believe in myths until the summer of her senior year. That summer, Ellie decided to spend more time in the woods that surrounded Eldridge Hollow, where the trees bowed under the weight of age and the air buzzed with a silence that felt almost sentient. And why not? It was a place where she and her friends had shared laughter and secrets, a refuge from the trials of school and looming adulthood. But as the sun began to sink each evening, veils of twilight danced through the branches, casting eerie shadows. While her friends sought solace in video games and movies, Ellie felt drawn to the woods, a loneliness creeping into her heart that she couldn't quite shake off. One evening, after a long day of hiking, Ellie found herself deeper in the woods than ever before. The familiar footpaths twisted like a gnarled spine, the trees closing in around her. She sensed an unsettling presence, a feeling that she was being watched. Shaking it off, she continued deeper until she stumbled upon a small clearing lit by the soft gold of the dying sun. The tranquil setting was abruptly punctuated by a chilling thought. Where were the sounds of birds and crickets? The usual chatter of nature was replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She turned to leave, but as she did, she spotted something moving in the underbrush, a thin, skeletal figure slinking through the shadows. Panic gripped her, and she felt paralyzed as she realized the tales of the Rake were more than just stories. The creature's long limbs moved with a sinewy grace, its body blending with the darkness around it. She turned to run, but every instinct screamed at her to stay still, to avoid its gaze. In that moment of flight, Ellie heard a voice, a whispering tone that slithered through her mind. "Help me," it begged. The sound was a soft, broken melody, one that both soothed and terrified her. The Rake, she thought, was trying to lure her in. Summoning courage, Ellie shook off the paralysis and bolted back toward the path she'd come from. The trees shifted in her periphery, and she swore she could feel the Rake right behind her, the chill of its breath, the rustling of leaves as it chased her. But as she ran, she noticed a strange phenomenon. The woods seemed to shift around her, the paths twisting and turning, trapping her in an endless loop. Gasping for breath, she lost her sense of direction, her only guide the fading light of the sun. Finally, with adrenaline coursing through her veins, she broke through the trees and stumbled out onto a familiar field. Her friends were gathered around a crackling fire, laughter echoing in the night. She felt a crushing relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. She looked back, heart racing, expecting to see the Rake emerging from the woods. Nothing. "Oh Ellie, you scared us. Where were you?" Her friend Lisa called out, slipping her arm over Ellie's shoulders. "You've got to stop wandering off alone. You know about the stories?" Ellie blinked and shook her head, dismissing her friend's concern. "It's just a folktale," she murmured, but even as she spoke, she felt the insistent dread clawing at her insides. Like the Rake had followed her, waiting silently for night to fall again. That night, she lay in her bed, haunted by the vision of the creature's long fingers and hollow gaze. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a growing sense of urgency. The photo of her friends at the fire hung on her wall, its warmth contrasted against the empty space she felt, as if something essential had been stolen away. Weeks passed. The summer sunlight waned into autumn rust, and Ellie had nearly forgotten the Rake, until one fateful night. She awoke gasping, a bone-chilling echo of a wheeze ringing in her ears. In the dim glow from her bedside lamp, she could see a figure hunched over her bedroom window. The Rake loomed there, its pallid skin shining unnaturally in the faint light, fingers walking like spiders across the glass. Panic surged as she remembered the tales. Forced movements, strange occurrences, disappearing friends. Had others understood the danger, or had they fallen victim to its grasp? "Help me," it murmured again, and this time, the voice felt all too familiar. It was her own. With a terrifying realization that she had unwittingly entered a pact with the creature in the woods, Ellie understood. The Rake would not remain content until it had taken her voice, her spirit, and left her nothing more than a husk, calling out for help in the night. Heart pounding, she scrambled from bed, her hands trembling. She pulled on her shoes and raced from her room, bursting through the front door into the chill of the night. The moonlight painted the landscape in silver, the woods now a siren's call once more. But this time, she knew she wouldn't let it win. The rake was there, waiting for her, its fingers beckoning. Ellie steeled herself, clutching the memory of her friends, their laughter echoing in her mind, and as she took a step closer, she faced the figure head on. "You won't take me," she shouted, her voice breaking the silence like glass against stone. And for the first time, the rake flinched, a crack in its faceless facade, revealing something more human behind the ghastly form. It trembled, the darkness swirling around them, lifting as she stood firm. There was a moment of stilled air, a pause that stretched like infinity. Then she turned away, sprinting back towards the warmth of her home, heart racing. She felt the woods tremble behind her, but she wouldn't look back. On the edge of Eldridge Hollow, the stories would continue. But Ellie knew the truth about the rake. Its grasp was lost in her defiance, a creature bound by its own shadows. And as dawn broke, she knew she had escaped not just as a survivor, but unyielded to the darkness that sought to claim her.